Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Car Crash Wednesday, which we've aptly renamed MedMal Wednesday because one of the other elements of what Physicians Legal Consultants does is screen cases and answer medical questions based on standard of care and causation. And next to me, as usual, is my friend and colleague, Dr. Armin Feldman.
Hi, Mike. Hello, everybody watching. Welcome to this episode.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And before, it's something a little bit different. We have a lot of car crash cases. And I know I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn who do attorneys that do a lot of medical malpractice work. So I felt like this would really hit home. And we recently had a few cases that involved standard of care analysis. So before we start, though, I would like to make sure everyone knows how they can reach us. First of all, you can send any comments, you can request information, we could set up a time to chat. If you want to send us a short note at comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. And also, we haven't always put this forth, but we should have been making a bigger deal about it. We are on what episode, Armin?
We just did episode 17, and in fact, it's not this week, though. It's next week where we are scheduled to do episode 18 of the podcast.
And that's our podcast website address there, but we can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to your podcast. And we've been getting a lot of good listenership. We have, for us, we're getting 30 to 50 downloads of these episodes upon release. So we have some interest in followers. And we really enjoy doing it. It's very casual, and we talk about cases. We talk about how we approach clients and attorney clients and the whole process about this world of medical legal consulting.
Right. And I would just add to what Mike said that for our attorney viewers, if you have a case, obviously we'd like to talk with you about a case. Send us an email and we'll get back in touch with you. And also, I want to give a warm welcome to all the physicians that are watching, because not only do we have an attorney audience, but what Mike and I have found is that as an unintended good consequence, a lot of physicians are tuning in as well.
It's awesome. Good point. Well, let's jump into the case. So, and during this, please, anyone who's watching, you can feel free to make some comments, ask questions. We will be answering anything live that comes up. So I'm going to get rid of some of the fanfare here, and we're going to pull up our case for the day, which is a merit analysis, as I call it, because it's more than just a record review. And I like the wording merit analysis because it really does a better job of explaining how we jump into the records, the medical research that we do, the guidelines we review, the other medical testifying experts within specialties that we talk to as part of our research. It really is a top to bottom analysis, and we do it quickly and much more affordably than most of your traditional medical experts who are retained to testify and provide affidavits of merit and things like that.
Right. One thing I'd add to that is it is a merit review. So, and Mike and I have been talking about this, but Mike, give me a sense of what percentage of those cases in which you're looking at merit do you actually recommend to the attorney that it would be a worthwhile case to go forward?
Roughly 20%. I bet 10 or 20%.
Okay.
So the majority of my cases, I'm getting hundreds, if not thousands of pages of medical records, a little bit of a summary, and then maybe a timeline that their nurse paralegal prepared. And then I'm giving them the facts of the case, good or bad. And I'll be honest, Armin, I kind of lean conservative because I know in this world of medical negligence, if they're pursuing cases that are kind of gray, it can be tricky and expensive. So
Right.
I lean conservative. I like to just give the facts of the standard of care, however that is. And sometimes those conversations can be a little bit awkward. I'm not going to lie, depending on the attorney.
Right. And a lot of, obviously you can do a written report like you've done here.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time you're also able to just help the attorney with a verbal report, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's even more cost effective because we're really in the early stages, that pre-litigation stage where I use the analogy, it's almost more like having a doctor extension of the team, of the firm. So I have been told that our work is non-discoverable, that this is work product. And like you said, a lot of times it's just a phone conversation where we're having dialogue and answering questions.
Right. Okay.
This particular case jumped out at me. Spoiler alert, I did recommend that it has merit. And the question was whether or not this woman who ultimately passed away was managed appropriately, or whether there was a delay in care. So I in this report, which this is a very brief report, I think it's 2 or 3 pages long, I just summarized that it was my opinion that there was a deviation of standard of care in the management of her hypoventilation. And so this was a 63-year-old woman. This is all redacted, so none of this information is actually spot on, in case there's an attorney out there who thinks this sounds familiar. And the woman had undergone surgery for a large hiatal hernia, massive hiatal hernia. And she had an open surgery. It was complex, and she had some comorbidities. And it was a very, very big surgery, and she was a large woman. The same day of the surgery, she got new onset of atrial fibrillation, and she got very short of breath. They started her on a cardizem drip and got cardiology involved. They appropriately did a CT scan to make sure there was no pulmonary embolism, but it did reveal a partially collapsed lower lung, which becomes important in this case because we're starting to see signs that this woman may be susceptible to respiratory failure.
Okay.
She got a chest x-ray that showed hypoventilation on this date. Her echocardiogram was normal. She was getting IV fluids. She was being diuresed due to a small kidney injury, probably from burden during the surgical recovery. And this is what is interesting, and we know this as physicians, Armin, that a lot of times litigation pursues whenever a family feels like they weren't heard. And regardless sometimes of the facts, a family can be very upset. And the facts of this case, it kind of makes sense that 2 days after surgery, in the morning, the woman was being visited by her daughter, who adamantly, and this is recorded by the nurse, insisted on a group meeting with all of the mom's doctors because she believed her mother was actually getting a lot worse. And by that, she was looking much weaker. She was straining to breathe. And the daughter was, in hindsight, very accurately observing signs of distress.
Did that meeting take place, Mike?
In the record, it's actually kind of gray. There was a PA that came on the floor, but the surgeon wasn't available, and the managing hospitalist was also not available. So there was a PA and there was a nurse, but it wasn't really the decision makers.
Okay. Was that important to the case?
Well, it certainly will be when it litigates, because I believe that when you have a critical combination of decision makers and medical leaders of care, you're going to get a better, more accurate understanding of the needs of the patient. Yeah. So I think in this case, there was some things missed because this was at 9:30 that was documented. And at 11 a.m., the woman got out of bed and walked to the bathroom, but she started to continually feel short of breath, and she had low oxygen saturations. It actually wasn't noted by the nurse what that number was, but she had to be put in a chair and then wheeled to the bedside. The nurse called respiratory therapy, and oxygen saturations remained low. Funny enough, that wasn't completely documented. I saw 88, I saw mid 80s, which is, as you and I know, really insufficient for oxygenating someone in post-surgical period.
Right, should be about 95% or better, right?
Exactly. So they ordered a chest x-ray, and correctly, I might add, got a stat arterial blood gas, which gives a instantaneous picture of the woman's respiratory ability for her to how she is oxygenating. It's going to show how much oxygen is in her blood and if her body is stressed at all. So she actually then was probably due to stress on her body. She went back into atrial fibrillation at 11:30. This is a complicating factor that was probably induced by hypoventilation.
This is an abnormal heart rhythm.
Exactly.
In which there's a fluttering of the atrial chambers of the heart, not the ventricular chambers, but the atrium flutter.
And they called out to cardiology because of this AFib, but no orders were given. She was put on a non-rebreather, which is essentially high-dose oxygen on a mask that covers her face. And she was ordered to be transferred to the ICU. Now, the timeline here is very important. So that arterial blood gas, the result was in the system at 11:43. Her arterial pH, and this is a little bit scientific maybe for some of our attorneys, but her arterial pH was 7.1. That is very low. That's considered acidotic. And the term here would be respiratory acidosis, because she is unable to get rid of the carbon dioxide in her lungs. Carbon dioxide is acidotic. So it actually lowers, the pH of the blood. And that indicates that she is significantly unable to get rid of carbon dioxide.
Right. The lower the pH, the more acid and acidic is the blood.
And when you look at this timeline, Armin, you can see here, so the two relevant progress notes that I pointed out to my attorney were, particularly the second one where the patient arrived to the ICU floor at 12:48. So this is an hour and 5 minutes after a blood gas had already indicated that she was severely acidotic, and that she had partially collapsed lung and was hypoventilating and was also, experiencing significant distress, likely respiratory in nature. And all they did was pump straight oxygen onto her. And that clearly, wasn't enough. Her oxygen saturations dropped into the 30s and 40s. And then they put her on BiPAP, which is kind of the next step of a big mask that gives you complete oxygen by your airway. And so they transferred her in the ICU. And as soon as they transferred her onto the bed, she lost her pulse and coded, probably from respiratory distress and failure.
So she had a cardiac arrest?
Yes, probably hypoperfusion. Yep.
Right. Secondary to lack of oxygenation, which then secondarily affected the heart.
Exactly. It's really sad. And as part of this, Armin, so, this took time for me to put this together and understand all the facts. But as we have a network, and I'm sure you have the same, of medical experts who do participate in testimony and writing affidavits. And this case was really, I believe, the fault of a critical care should have been picked up by a critical care intensivist or even a hospitalist who should have seen. So I spoke to an expert that I use quite regularly and asked him.
This was a curbside consult, Mike?
Exactly. And curbside for me is part of the daily routine, to be honest, because a lot of cases I can really figure out and give my attorneys very reliable opinions, but especially when a case has merit, I love to call in my experts who are part of that subspecialty and discuss with them. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes it takes 15 minutes just to go through some of the facts to make sure that I'm getting my attorneys the right opinion, because I know that if I give a thumbs up, it's expensive. It's going to take time, resources, investment of the family a lot of times. So I want to make sure my opinions are spot on. And so in this case too, and a lot of times, Armin, I will then refer medical experts for that follow-up testimony or affidavit of merit. as part of the services that we offer, which is expert vetting and referral.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one of those that definitely fit that bill for being able to offer that to this attorney. And so I summarized this report that, with that information available at that time, she was demonstrating significant pulmonary distress, life-threatening hypoventilation. And as the expert and I agreed, she would have benefited from being intubated much sooner. She was really pretty much started suffering hypoventilation and strangulation from her lungs being collapsed and from her inability to oxygenate for about an hour.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's a very long time. And sometimes 10 minutes is too long.
Right.
So I also just made very brief follow-up consideration that it would have been reasonable to consider assisted ventilation, even precautionary, as a post-surgical maneuver for her. This could be helpful as the attorney structures their case and approach to the case.
Mm-hmm.
Once she had shown critically low oxygen saturations, the threshold to consult critical care medicine or anesthesiology for intubation really is standard of care. That would have breached that threshold. And that critical arterial blood gas result was available for 60 minutes prior to her fatal decompensation, which is the way I phrased it. And finally, it was my opinion that if she had been treated in an emergent fashion and properly ventilated, she would have had the opportunity to become stabilized and would have likely experienced a normal recovery.
Properly ventilated in this case means being intubated.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, you said she had some other health problems. Is that right?
Well, she had morbid obesity,
mm-hmm.
and she had hypertension, and I believe that's all. But no significant heart disease, no significant pulmonary disease.
Okay. All right. So there's no reason to think that if she had been intubated early, she could have had a much better outcome, and that her other healthcare problems weren't working against her for a recovery.
Exactly.
Okay.
And interestingly, her death certificate, cause of death, said natural causes.
I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. So I love doing this work, Armin. We talk about this a lot. So this is something that gets my Sherlock Holmes juices flowing.
Right. So how much time do you think you spent on this?
4 hours.
4 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
That's certainly a cost-effective way for the attorney to get this kind of pretty sophisticated opinion on what was going on in terms of where he could go forward with the case.
It's exactly right, Armin. That's why I love thinking of this like they have a doctor on speed dial, or a doctor working remotely who is part of their firm.
Right.
I can tell you that having a nurse is fantastic and actually complements this work that we do quite well.
Right. Yeah.
That's all I got today. I say we pack it in. It looks like we both have sun. My colors, I see them changing. We both have sunny weather. So let's go ahead forth with the rest of our day.
Okay. Well, if you have a question, a comment, a case, you can always reach us at comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. We also, as Mike said, would suggest you take a listen to the podcast. And we look forward to having you on our next Car Crash Wednesday.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We would like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode.
And we really want to help you to increase case value, save attorney time, and do it without breaking the bank.
We're really looking forward to 2024, and so go ahead and click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you're notified of any new episodes.
And we look forward to having you on the next episode.